This is the weekend edition of the Core Report.
Hello and welcome. There are many types of leadership, but one newer form of leadership, which is perhaps slightly less understood and maybe less studied, is called leading from the back. Now, what does that mean? It means that traditionally, when you think of leadership, it's really pulled in some ways from running militaries, where generals led from the front and armies were led from the front. That's obviously changed. Today, generals no longer lead from the front. The question, therefore, is in a corporate context, how does that apply? There's a new book called Leading from the Back to Achieve the Impossible by Ravi Kant, the former vice chairman and CEO of Tata Motors, along with Harry Paul, the co-author of Fish, and also Ross Reck, co-author of The Win-Win Negotiator. So Leading from the Back essentially focuses on a couple of things. One is that organizations themselves have become large and complex, and supply chains have become more diverse. The second is that the workplace dynamic is changing and is changing quite rapidly, as that's something that you and me know. So therefore, the new leadership that's required is clearly not in the domain of one person or concentrated in one person, and the one who is constantly put in the spotlight as if others don't matter. And the final outcome is therefore, to some extent, impervious of the external environment. So the challenge, as Ravi Kant, the author of this, says, and my guest for today, is how do you introduce a new concept against a powerful and long-established concept of leadership? So the solution, of course, is this book. But what it tries to address is that three things, basically. One is, how should I be in this new world where you're leading from the back, so to speak? Second is, how should I deal with the team, including building it up? And then thirdly, how do we deal with the task or a set of tasks, which could be towards a common objective or a broader corporate objective? So we're going to use all of that. And in the context of Mr. Ravi Kant's own experiences over many decades, to try and see what leading from the back means and how it could be applied, most importantly, in your own case. Mr. Kant, thank you so much for joining me. So let me first try and understand, including for those who are listening, watching, why did you pick a theme like this? Because as an external observer, as a financial journalist who's followed you for some part of your career, I would think of you as someone who's leading from the front, because your last position was, for example, as vice chairman of Tata Motors. Similarly, you've been at the helm of many companies in consumer products like Philips, LML, and so on. So why a theme like this, and what brought you to this theme, and then what made you write about it?
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. Designation does not imply that you are leading from the front. So let me make that correction first. I've been asked to write books on what I did or what happened during my tenure in different companies. But I've been extremely reluctant to do that because I don't want to write about that. Then about 4 years ago, somebody told me that, why don't you write about your learnings? So that made me pause. And I said, okay, why not? So think about it. Then he suggested, you always tested the limits. Why don't you think about testing the limits? And that was the first cue I got. Second cue I got was, again, another close friend, business associate. So I asked him one day, how do you think you describe my way of working? And he said, he thought for a minute. Then he said, Ravi, you lead from the back. And that's when the penny dropped. And I said, okay, so let me go back. What does it mean? Because he was from advertising and I had huge respect for him. So he said, whatever he's saying is kind of a interesting thought. So I went back and deconstructed the entire thing of what does leading from the back mean. So I went back to my 50 years of experience, and then I culled out 3 basic, simple truths. And these truths were about myself. First, because you have to talk about yourself. Then is how to build a team. And number 3 is how together you tackle the task. Because ultimately, as a corporate person, you have to tackle a task. So in each of these 3, there are 3 simple things again. Simple to know, but very difficult to implement. So in the first one, what do I do with myself? Is first to have an open mind. Number 2 is that take ownership. And number 3 is be detached. Sometimes it may seem contradictory. We'll talk about it later. About the team, build trust, be collaborative, leverage strengths. And for task, test the limits, look outside in, and act tough soft. So the question was, how do I make it happen? Then somebody suggested it's good for a parable. And that also set me thinking, okay, what does it mean? I was writing a serious book. So what does it mean? So I went through some of the books and parables. I said, that's very interesting because my target group was mid-level manager. And I wanted it to be a low-priced book so that people shouldn't think twice about buying the book, although it was somewhat difficult topic. So that's how it came. Because I'm not a big writer or this thing, so we connected with two very famous parable authors in the US, Harry Paul and Ross Ray. And we combined together, and during COVID, over Zoom call and emails, we wrote the book. And I think the book has
So
come
Harry
out.
Paul is the one who wrote about fish in Seattle.
That's
Yeah.
right. Which has sold over 6 million copies by now. And Ross is also, he has been professor at Arizona State University, and he's a big consultant. I worked with this.
So let me begin with maybe sequentially. You said first is what do I do with myself? So what part or rather where in your career did you pose that question to yourself first? In which, let's say, organization or task that you were faced with?
Well, I posed it in many places, but let me cite one instance. When we were going to bidding for Daewoo Truck Company in South Korea. So we were all there, and they don't speak English. So English-speaking mid-level manager was assigned to us. So I was standing in the anteroom of the president, just with themselves, just the two of us. And I thought, as we are doing the due diligence and we want to kind of take over the company, but we are not taking an innate company. We are not taking a piece of machinery. We are taking living organisms. And therefore, we must know how these people perceive us or would they want to. So I asked him, who do you think you'd like to go with? And he said that we would like to go with a European company. So I asked him why. And he said that because it will ensure our career, it should ensure our future, because we'll get technology, we'll get this thing. Which, if you were a closed mind, you would say, no, what the hell? He doesn't know me. If you're full of ego, you'll say, he doesn't know me. And why is he saying this? But if with an open mind, if you think about it, then you feel that what he's saying is absolutely right. Because he needs to protect his career, he needs to protect his future. And that one sentence made the whole difference in our whole approach to taking over. We got everything translated into Korean. We took appointments with all from president, trade minister, governor, everybody else. And we informed them, told them, look, as Korea had done tremendous progress in technology and in business and all that, but they were lacking in one thing, corporate governance. And Tatas were doing corporate governance for over 100 years. So we had to teach them something as we were to take something. And the other thing is Tata Motors was very, very heavy into R&D and into well-connected worldwide with various things. That changed the whole tone. And when my team was coming back after due diligence, they became emotional. And they said, if the company is to go to anybody, it must go to Tatas. So it was not kind of our money that we were offering. It was the way we acted with them with a very open mind, and which changed everything, actually made us win the bid.
Right. And later or soon later, you were to acquire Jaguar Land Rover, which was, of course, an iconic in very different circumstances. So did a similar situation play out there as well?
Yeah, Govind, actually, if you look at it, the template was the same. So what was the template in South Korea? Our template was be a South Korean company in South Korea, not an Indian company in South Korea. It's a subtle difference, but a huge difference. Huge difference. That means you are seeing yourself as part of that scenario, not as somebody going from here and kind of acquiring. You are part of them. And you are therefore looking at the well-being of people, you are looking at the well-being of the society, you are looking at that's the Tata ethos. And we applied exactly the same template here also. Here also we had a very tough problem because the union was very, very strong at Unite, and they were supposed to be leaning towards some others. We had a 3-hour not confrontation, but very tough discussion. They came with 11-page or 12-page questionnaire, and they kept asking question. And it was eyeball to eyeball, answers. So after all this was over, Then my colleague said, sir, it has gone very tough. I don't think it is going to happen. But something inside me told me that no, I think we have been very honest, very transparent, and they will accept us. And lo and behold, 2 days later, they went on a press conference. They said the company must go to Tata's. So, what I'm trying to say is, it is this kind of attitude which can win over people and which can make things and get extraordinary results.
So JLR again, I mean, intuitively, this is a company with globally iconic automobile brands. From India, Tata Motors is better known at that time, at least as a commercial vehicle manufacturer. So there's no real synergy. As people, Tatas are great, but they're only known in India and not really outside. So what is it that was the clinching point in at least those interactions that you had?
Govind, actually, let me preface this, just taking your point a little further. The president of the dealer association in the US called us a tandoori chicken company. And he said, how can a tandoori chicken company take over iconic brands like this? But we found various things which I think many people were not aware of. And I'll list out 4 or 5 things. Number one is, although they were not known for quality, I think our predecessor had spent a lot of money and made the quality, manufacturing quality very good. And therefore, the products which are going to come out were going to be of high quality. Then their engineering, this thing was very strong and the style was very strong. And the kind of products we saw in the pipeline, we were very, very enthused that not only what was going to come in the next 1 year, but over the next 4 or 5 years, it was strong. And because they were strong in engineering, they could continue to give. Third thing we found out was that even though the dealers were under stress, their loyalty to the brand was amazing. I have never seen in my life that kind of brand loyalty which the dealers had for Jaguar and Range Rover brand. And I thought, if this is the case, and if we were to combine some strengths from Tata's, like our focus on cost and our focus on consumer orientation, then we can make a very powerful thing. I think that's what we discussed. Mr. Tata was, of course, here very, very involved. And he's the one who suggested that we should look at it. And finally, of course, it all happened. And Mr. Tata and I and some other people went around the US meeting dealers. We must have had scores of dealers. At the end of the day, people understood who Tatas are. And because Mr. Tata himself was personifying the group, the same person, tandoori chicken person, became our best friend. So what I'm trying to say is, while cut and dried things are fine and they should happen, but I think success depends a lot on other things, the soft issues, how you behave with people, how you deal with people, and that kind of thing.
So the second point you talked about is building the team, either for a task or a company as a whole. But I'm assuming since you've always been with mature businesses, it could be more sort of fresh teams or renewed teams or for a certain task. So what are the examples that stand out the most to you as you look back?
First, let me say, Govind, I've worked in 7 companies, each in a different industry, of which I had no knowledge of. And therefore, how do I succeed? Because somebody.
And where do you start? If you've come from a scooter company to a consumer products company.
Or to Philips.
Yeah.
From scooter company to Philips, or from Philips to Tata Motors. And before that, Titan watches or Hawkins pressure cookers. So with some stroke of luck, I got into the new company, but I have no knowledge of. Now, how do I do? What do I do? That point in time, I went alone. I did not go with the coterie of my people. Because by going alone, I'm giving them the signal that I am trusting you. I have not brought my trusted people along with me, whom I'm going to trust and distrust. And that's how. So we build trust. So main thing was building trust. It takes time. Some people begin to understand you in 3 months' time and say, okay, this guy is okay. Some people will take a year. Some people will take 2 years. Some people may not trust you at all. But you have to take that chance. But once you build that trust, they are building a very strong foundation. Because then trust leads to collaboration, a strong collaboration. And if you identify people's strengths, so you can understand taking people's strengths, individual people's strengths, in a collaborative manner, where there's a trust pervading, you are making for a very, very powerful organization. And you may be thinking that, okay, I'll go from here to there, but this organization can go from here to there. And that is the difference.
So in the case of Tata Motors, when you joined, these big acquisitions were still a little away. So at that time, it was more about launching, let's say, Nano, which didn't do that well, and Indica or Indigo, which came, I think, a little later. But these were existing. But Tata had already transitioned from commercial vehicles to passenger vehicles.
Was
Transitioning.
Just transitioning.
So what are the kind of challenges then? Because at least again from the outside, it seemed like a lot of people felt that Tatas would not succeed in the passenger vehicle because they said for decades it's only built commercial vehicles, many of them out of Jamshedpur, some from Pune and so on.
So let me go back a little because I became the CEO of the company a little later in 2005, I think. So first 6 years, I was only commercial vehicles, looking after commercial vehicles. So that time, unfortunately, the market tanked. And commercial vehicles have very close connection with the economy, and therefore the commercial vehicle market tanked. But in that market itself, we were able to maintain our market share. But of course, we turned in our first loss in company's history. And that's the kind of thing I confronted or I faced with when I joined the company. And therefore, how do you make the turnaround? And of course, a number of things were done. Cost reduction was one of the key ones, then new products and changing other things, so many things in marketing and all that. So we were able to convert a 500 crore loss in a 500 crore profit in just 2 years. That was a fantastic thing. And that's how people came together because people's egos, successful companies have also a lot of egos. And so people said, no, it can't happen. But it happened to them. And therefore you challenge them. Now it has happened. Now let's pull up our socks and do something as a team. And things happened and we came out of the woods and we made a law. Again, another big thing happened is, introduction of ACE. We don't talk about that. But ACE created a market.
New market
which was equivalent to the existing commercial vehicle market. That is how big that transformation was, ACE. And it was a roaring success.
So ACE, for those who don't know, would be a small truck, right?
A small
mini
truck is the last mile connectivity, whether for urban areas or for rural areas. And it exceeded all our expectations. We were flabbergasted by the success of this. We had not thought it will succeed.
Where did the idea for ACE come from?
ACE, number of places. Because one thing was there that time Mr. Bajpayee's Pradhan Mantri Gramin Sadak Yojana was going. And therefore, these were getting connected. And rural areas and urban areas were getting congested. Then somebody suggested, why don't you have this kind of vehicle? So we put a team and they went around the country. They looked at three-wheeler because this need was being met by three-wheelers. They looked at three-wheelers. They looked at the need. They came with a fantastic product called ACE. And again, Tata Motors has this huge reservoir of talent as far as thinking in, I would say, low economy is concerned. They came up with this beautiful thing and we launched it. We launched it first in Tamil Nadu. We sorted out all the problems. We made it come to, I remember, we launched in Tamil Nadu and it was called Chota Hathi. So it became a roaring success, Chota Hathi. We started doing 600 a month and then somebody said, no, it's not going to sell more and all that. So we said, no, nothing doing. In India, there's no such thing as can't be doing more. So we again challenged ourselves and we reached a level of almost 1850 per month. Just one product in Tamil Nadu, which was our weakest market. As you know, our competitor had a very strong market.
Ashok Leyland, yeah.
Yeah, so we did very well. And then slowly expanded to entire South India. And then we took almost 9-10 months to go over the entire country.
And that model still continues today in roughly the same form and shape.
Yeah.
With some innovations here and there.
It's got variants for upper side, lower side, horizontal, all that, the whole idea. We built a whole new plant in Uttarakhand for ACE.
So ACE was the success and you were saying the transitioning to passenger vehicles. So tell us about the team factor that was playing there.
I think again, the person who spearheaded the ACE project was asked to also spearhead now the Nano project. And I think, I understand it commercially, unfortunately, it didn't succeed. But as far as innovation is concerned, it is kind of unheard. It can almost impossible. to work backwards that, okay, it must cost 1 lakh rupees, and then work backwards. And if there was an imaginary car, what should be the different component price? That's how we started, from a white sheet of paper. And then engineering team kind of looked at it very seriously. We talked to our suppliers. Suppliers played a very, very key role in that and making it happen. After that, we did a number of things. And therefore, it came out after 7 years in a different form. It was still priced at, I think it's a tribute to the organization, tribute to the excellence of Tata Motors, especially the engineering team. And then, of course, we did a number of things. And
so if I were to just build on that for a moment, if you were to apply those lessons today to any company, including in, let's say, automotive, we're seeing so many brand launches, so many variations. What would be the lesson from Nano from then which we can apply now, as in the good and the bad?
Yeah, I think the first lesson is to don't think that anything is impossible. And you need to, therefore, work in a methodical manner and talk to people. And once you set yourself in the third part is test the limit. This is testing the limits of making a car at 100,000 rupees. So how do you make it happen? As I said, we had a white sheet exercise. This is the selling price. Then come back. This will be excise duty on that. Come back. This is the bill of materials. Say 70% of that. And if this is the bill of material, what should the cost of tires? What should the cost of engine? What should the sheet metal cost? What is blah, 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 everything. And then you go and say, if I have to make an engine at this price, what do I need to do? That forces you to innovate. I mean, for innovation, I don't think there's any parallel in car industry as far as Nano is concerned. So it forces you to innovate. It forces you to collaborate. It forces you to go outside the box.
The X factor was missing, which is why it was not successful, either because of the looks or the marketing or the branding.
I think looks for good. It's amazing. I've still not been able to put my finger on it. The advertising brought lakhs of people into the showrooms, lakhs of people. And out of that, at least 50% of people took test rides. It was quite amazing. And many people out of that put in money. But after that, they didn't come back.
Because there were other models at slightly higher price.
I don't know. That's why I'm saying I've not been able to put a finger at it. But as I said, this was an impossible task we had taken upon ourselves. We worked backwards to make it happen. And as I said, we were very tough as far as cost is concerned. But of course, we took care of people. The other thing in Nano, which I think is truly remarkable, which has not happened anywhere in the world, is we had built a complete factory in West Bengal. In last minute, we had to take a very, very tough decision to move it out from there. So we were moving to 1,300 kilometers to opposite side in Gujarat. Now, as Mr. Tata had already promised this thing, so we needed to, because this would take about 15 months. So on one side, you are dismantling a factory, bolt by bolt, machine by machine, packing it up in container. Other side, you are building another factory to take all that. On third side, we converted part of our plant in Uttarakhand for ACE, which we had built for ACE, into making Nano. And that's how we started making Nano in small quantities. And so doing three things at the same time, I don't think has ever happened. And it is, again, a tribute to the team, to Tata Motors' tenacity and not giving up on anything, and to have made it happen. It's fantastic.
If you would say today, just looking back, who was missing in that room when, let's say, suppose you had the whole team of people who designed the Nano, who were very good at, let's say, managing costs, logistics, bringing down prices, and of course, the challenge of then moving the plant because of political reasons. But who would you say, in retrospect, was missing in that room?
I can't think of that, but ultimately, it was Mr. Tata's idea that he would like to make a car at that price.
Which apparently was influenced by C.K. Prahlad's bottom of the pyramid.
Whatever. I am not going into all that, but he had thought of this in Geneva, and he disclosed this a few years earlier in Geneva. And Mr. Tata was very, very involved in this whole thing as to what should be the shape, what should be this thing. He used to personally frequently come to Pune, drive the cars in various things, see the thing, have the presentation, very, 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 very involved in creating the... But as I said, I'm not able to put a finger at it, but
That someone was
some-
missing, you feel.
I don't know how someone was missing.
Or if you were to contrast it with, let's say, the success of Ace, or maybe some of the other passenger cars later.
Yeah, it's Govind, this is the X factor, if I can say, which you may call things about which you can't explain. And sometimes some things happen beyond your expectations. You are working the same thing, you're doing the same thing. Some things is beyond your expectations, some things is below your expectation. And that's what has happened.
Right. In leading from the back, you also talk about teams. I mean, that's the third factor, right? How do you bring together a team? And the task, the assembling of the team is one thing. And then, making sure that team converges towards a task, and usually an impossible task. In the Nano's context, it appears to me that you really had no competition except your own, let's say, will to do it at a certain point of time and take it to the market. It was not like there was someone else who was also racing to the market with a similar product. So you had to beat them. So this was your own will. I mean, again, instances that you can lean back on where teams have come together, in some cases maybe led from the back.
In everything, Govind, I talked about...
For impossible tasks.
I'm turnaround of Tata Motors, the first one. That was very impossible, very, very difficult. Then putting Cummins engines at the top of the heap as far as commercial vehicles is concerned. Then introduction of Ace. Then introduction of Nano. Going and acquiring first time a truck company in South Korea where people are very nationalistic, people don't speak English and very proud of themselves, to go and make a success of that, or then to Jaguar Land Rover. Everywhere it's the team. Everywhere is the team. So if you got a good team, if the people are very honest, people are very transparent, there's no kind of politics and all that within the group, and all are moving towards one direction, and you have support from the top boss, Mr. Tata, then I said nothing is impossible. And Mr. Tata, that is one thing I've learned from Mr. Tata, to think big and bold. I could never have imagined that we'll be taking such decisions. It is, I would say, the sheer influence or sheer support from Mr. Tata that one was able to take the decision, because you knew that if things went wrong, you are still going to be there doing something. So I think he was, and that's a great, great thing. And that's how Tata Motors became from 1.9 when I joined the company, $1.6 or $7 billion company, to $39 billion company in a span of 15 years. If the company had not taken such bold decisions, we wouldn't be here.
So one of those decisions was to become a global company, and which also was sort of facilitated by the time, the mid 2000s to end 2000s. I mean, the rupee was strong, Indian companies were acquiring overseas, so the ecosystem was sort of favorable. But that also requires taking bets which are completely... And again, when you look around the room, there are many people who would say India is the big market, and that has subsequently happened because everyone has now sort of come back to India because India is the growth market. And at that time, it felt that, okay, let's go outside. So what were the kind of different kind of views, and how did the teams come together?
That time, Tata Motors was only commercial vehicles. And commercial vehicles is a very cyclical business. It goes up 40%, goes down 70%. And this is the nature of the beast, so to say. And not only in India, worldwide. And therefore, if you wanted to reduce the cyclicality, you needed to also put some things which were less cyclical. And that's how actually ACE came. Now you are wanting to know about it, that's how ACE came. Because smaller commercial vehicles are less cyclical. And there's some phase difference. And go international. Go into car business. This is all part of the same strategy, that if you were to have combined all this, then the whole company will be less cyclical. And therefore, you won't have to go through what happened in 1999. So that was one of the things. And because you have a strong resource base in Tata Motors, in people, I think that's the biggest thing. And you have a kind of strong leadership, which Mr. Tata provided into really thinking big. And that gave a lot of encouragement. And we put young people. I mean, for example, we took out young people and put them in charge of ACE, whole team, and did fantastically well. We also put young team in Nano. We sent also a very fairly, not young, but some mid-level team to due diligence and all that for Daewoo and this thing. So I would say if you give people freedom, if you look at their competencies and strengths and give them opportunities, I have seen that 9 out of 10 times it works.
And Tata Motors today, I mean, is, for example, let's say has 80% of the EV market today, electric vehicle market. It is spinning off as a separate company and so on. So would you say that what you saw then and were also maybe setting up and the kind of team structures and so on is also responsible for what we are seeing today?
Sure. I think the current leadership of Tata Motors, whether it is Mr. Chandrasekhar, who the chairman, and Shailesh Chandra and all, they have taken a big bet that electrification is the way. And if whenever markets change, when the trend changes, at that point in time, if you position yourself strongly, then you have a great benefit because you can go with the wave. And that's what Tata Motors done. They have taken the first step. Absolute clarity, no hesitation, and they're putting in a lot of resources as far as design, quality, everything is concerned. And that's how they have taken the lead, and they want to now grow the electric market. There may be other problems, other this thing and all that, and they're always naysayers in society. There are always people saying, no, this should not be done, this thing India can't afford. But my personal view is that India cannot afford several technologies. We don't have the benefit of that luxury. And therefore, India should choose one and put all resources and just move forward.
So when you say different, you mean like hydrogen and
so many things.
LNG
so many other
electric,
things I don't want to name. But it fritters away energy. It fritters away the focus. It fritters away. Can you imagine that same model is there in 4 variants? You have to have procurement, you have to have manufacturing, you have to store them, you have to have dealers. People don't understand this. But a manufacturer understands this, and therefore you're making things very complicated. That's all I'm trying to say. And therefore, with a single-minded focus and purpose, if you go ahead, which I think Tata Motors is doing, it's fantastic. If they move forward like this, I think...
The point that you made is that catching the trend. And you feel that today, whether you use the leading from back or, assembling teams, in general, of course, successful companies by definition must be, but in general, do you feel companies are aligned well to spot trends, to respond fast to them? I'm talking about in India now specifically.
Well, I don't want to generalize, but you'll see umpteen examples where people who have caught the trend have benefited immensely. I'll give one example of where I've been associated. Titan watches, for example. Titan watches done fantastic things. But one of the key things which aided Titan watches then was they caught the trend at the right time. For watches, for quartz watches. I was there only for 5 years. For quartz watches. And because it was heavily dominated by mechanical watches, as you know, HMT was the king and 85-90% market share, then Titan took the bold risk of being only in quartz watches, because there was a trend of people already becoming fashion conscious. And therefore, they were already into multiple watch ownership, which were being fed by smuggled watches and things like that. And therefore, it caught the trend at the right time and went ahead. And you know what's happened to HMT watches later on. Later on, of course, Titan went into other retail things like jewelry and various other things that they are going into. That I don't want to comment. But at that point in time, because it took the bold risk, it caught the trend at the right time, it went up.
And you're also saying that, in a way, put many eggs in one basket, like whether it's in the case of electric today or Ace at that time or Nano, and then let's say Quartz in the case of Titan. And they, for every company, will have something. But definitely don't go with 5 different products and try and,
So catching the trend is an important thing. I mean, there's so many market researches done, whether it's qualitative, quantitative, this thing, that thing, so many things are there. I think you need to look at all that. And with that, you need to add your gut feel in trying to catch the trend. Kya ho raha, kya nahi ho raha, that kind of thing.
So as we conclude, let me ask you then 2 questions at any time where you feel that you were strong on your gut, but it didn't turn out as well. And the second where, again, you relied on your gut, but things turned out well.
One was, of course, I'll take Hawkins. Hawkins is a great company. In fact, I learned my marketing at Hawkins. So we were selling pressure cookers. I'm talking about 75 to 80, a long time ago.
But it's the same pressure cooker, roughly, give or take.
We have pressure cookers. And then we thought of coming into electrical products. And we had 2 fantastic products. One was a infrared cooker, quick time, 2 minutes, 3 minutes you'll cook. Other is slow cooker, put it overnight. Both fantastic products, quality-wise, look-wise, performance-wise. We did many things, many things. It didn't succeed. We had to finally close down. Talkers had to close down. Now, I felt very bad because here were very good products, extremely supported by marketing and sales and everything, but didn't. Because perhaps the market was not ready. The consumers were not ready to go for that. But today you see so many slow cookers in the market, so many this thing in the market. I mean, there's no doubt of them. So maybe they'll come back again with this. I don't know, but I'm talking about 25 years. So it was way ahead of time.
That time we used to see Panasonic and those brands, I think.
Yeah, it was way ahead of time. That's all I'm saying. And therefore, perhaps, had we come maybe 10 years later, we would have caught it in a better fashion.
So that's one, let's say, where things didn't work out. And on the other hand, where something you feel you were bang on.
Titan Quartz is a fantastic example. A success of LML is again a fantastic example. Is to how people were used to one type of product, scooters, and because I was coming from Titan watches into LML, I could see the consumer was already changing. And therefore, can we add some bells and whistles and frills and things like that, upgrade it little and make it little more aspirational and put it. And lo and behold, what happens? 9% market share turns into 32% market. 9%, 32 in a very intensive, competitive, dominant industry. Can you imagine? So, because we were able to catch the trend, we were able to do it. It's not because, of course, you have to do certain things, no question of that. But if you are able to catch the trend, then your success is far greater than you can ever imagine.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much for inviting. Thank you.
That was the Core Report with me, Govindraj Ethiraj. Do stay connected with more of our coverage at the Core. You can check out our website or sign up to our newsletter for our exclusive stories, one in-depth feature a day on www.thecore.in. Do also track us on LinkedIn, where we usually post synopses or extracts of our top stories and interviews. We would love your feedback on how we can make business more interesting and relevant, including, of course, India's vibrant manufacturing sector. So write to us at feedback@thecore.in, and thank you once again for listening.